When actually, if we reveal our vulnerabilities and learn to package that in a way that we build trust and our story, if people don't identify with that, that's completely fine, because we can't expect everyone in the world to like us. So don't worry so much about those people, which can be simple to say, but often can be difficult to live with. It's a learning process. And over time, you will start to attract people in your life who are like-minded. They think like you, they believe in you, and they just want to help. And sometimes it can be a bit of a moment of almost shedding that skin of who you were to grow into who you are. That can be a difficult transition. But I tell you what, once you actually feel that and you're really motivated and committed to that, then it doesn't matter what people say. If they want to sit there and talk shit, well, they can keep talking. And I hope they're ready to keep talking, because I'm not stopping, and I know you're not going to stop. And this is just part of the process.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Dichotomy podcast. This is a show dedicated to exploring the dichotomies we experience in business and in life. My name's Reid, and I'm a guy who's incredibly fascinated by understanding why we make the decisions we do in life, and ultimately, how do we lead a good life? As a business owner, I get the pressures of managing business, family, money, health can create great inner conflicts around what we actually want out of our business and our lives. This podcast is dedicated to exploring just that. I hope you enjoy it. Ladies and gentlemen, it's Reid here. Thank you for tuning in to today's episode of the Dichotomy podcast. My guest today is a gentleman by the name of James Whittaker. James and I met a few months ago at a dinner that was hosted by a mutual friend of ours, Ronsley Vaz, who's also appeared on the Dichotomy podcast. And James and I really hit it off. We were in a room of some pretty cool entrepreneurs, and I was fascinated to learn more about James's story. So when I was recently in LA in the US, which is where James lives, I caught up with him, and he graciously accepted my invitation to join me on the podcast. And James has had a really fascinating life journey, like all of my guests. He's got a really interesting career. He spent 10 years in the financial planning world before starting his own entrepreneurial journey. And most recently, he's the author of a best-selling book called Think and Grow Rich, The Legacy, which was released in 2018 this year, is the official companion to the multi-million-dollar film based on Napoleon Hill's timeless classic, Think and Grow Rich. In the course of putting that book together, James went out and interviewed 100 of the world's most revered entrepreneurs, business icons, athletes, to really unlock their secrets to success today. People like Barbara Corcoran, I hope I'm saying that correctly, property and sales expert Grant Cardone, and skateboarder turned business mogul Rob Dyrdek. And in the course of putting that book together, James has learnt an incredible amount around how to lead an extraordinary life. And that was one of the things that for me, I think really most resonated between James's story and my own journey, is that, James is really obsessed with figuring out what makes extraordinary achievers extraordinary. And certainly for me, I think a big part of what I feel called to communicate, share through this podcast is the lessons that we can learn in terms of how to lead a great life, how to lead an extraordinary life. And so I love this conversation with James. He was vulnerable, he was real, and he got into some really interesting stuff around his own journey. What are the dichotomies he's faced, how he overcame them to get to where he is today, which is, leading a enviable lifestyle in Los Angeles in the United States. He's regularly invited around the country to speak. And he's very much positioned himself in a very short space of time as a thought leader in the space of human potential, personal growth, and ultimately, how do we lead a successful life and a successful career? So I hope you enjoy this episode as much as I did. And ladies and gentlemen, please enjoy James Whittaker. There's some news I'm really excited to announce with you guys, and that news is we'll be launching a chapter for my company, Dent Global, in Toronto, Canada in 2019. Now, for those who don't know, for the last 8 years, my business partners and I have been building an award-winning business growth accelerator company called Dent, which has been operating in the UK, USA, Singapore, and Australia. To date, we've worked with over 3,000 established entrepreneurs fairly intensively through our flagship 12-month accelerator program called the Key Person of Influence Accelerator. Along with my business partner, Daniel Priestley, I've also revised and co-authored a Canadian edition of the Key Person of Influence book. Now, Daniel first published this book in 2010, and since then, more than 100,000 entrepreneurs around the world have taken up a copy of the book. With the launch into Canada, we decided that now is a good time to do a revised edition of the book. We've updated the content significantly with new stories and local Canadian case studies of people who are establishing themselves as visible, valuable, and well-connected key people of influence in their industries. So do me a favor, head on over to www.mikejamesreid.com, that's R-E-I-D, and from there you'll be able to navigate to our website for Dent. You'll be able to grab a copy of the revised Canadian edition of the Key Person of Influence book, and also join our online community of entrepreneurs who are making a dent in the universe. James Whittaker, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. Great to be here.
Mate, I appreciate you putting up your beautiful pad in Los Angeles, where we are right now. Can you describe a little bit of our surrounds for the listeners?
You're very welcome. Yes, here we are in Marina del Rey, Los Angeles, California, on a beautifully clear day. It's been raining the last few days, so we've actually, we're blessed with a very clear day to see from the ocean to the Hollywood sign.
It's a magnificent view. As we're sitting here, we're looking out into, I'm not sure which mountain range that is, but it's pretty sensational. And Hollywood sign on one side, the beach on the other, and just a beautiful afternoon. So, mate, but what I wanted to, maybe kind of where I wanted to start, right, particularly for a guy who has studied success principles in the way that you have, interviewed literally hundreds of thought leaders, cultural icons, entrepreneurs, to deconstruct how they live their life in a way that, you know, they kind of really lead an extraordinary life. I'm curious to ask you, how would you describe your last 24 hours? What are some of the maybe kind of no-fail routines or rituals, or just, you know, little things that you do on a regular basis? And then also, you know, what are some of the things that you might be procrastinating, which you know you should be doing more of?
Very, very good question. Well, I think building success into a process is very, very important. And people who are not productive often confuse themselves with being busy. And being busy is not what gets you where you need to be. In fact, being busy is often a sign that you're not very organized. The things that I use, I wake up and I use something called the 5-minute journal. It's actually interesting recording this here where we are, because I can see my 5-minute journal on one side and then office on the other. And if you actually notice here on my bedside table, you can see a book called The Obstacle is the Way. So whatever book I'm reading, if it has an interesting title or something that I actually want to keep right in front of me, I have it sitting up vertically so I can see it more and more. So before that, before The Obstacle is the Way, I had high performance habits. And then on the other side in my office, you can see the little canvas that I've got up there that says action, the difference between having and wanting. So it means that I'm sort of surrounded by this inspiration and motivation. So people who wake up, and you'll also notice that there's no clutter around here at all, because it just, anything like that takes away from any of that creative thought, I find it's just those impediments I just don't want anywhere in my life. And so having that, people who if your living and your working environment doesn't inspire and motivate you, it's a terrible foundation to start your day. So I wake up and I use the 5-minute journal. So experience has taught me, and the people that I've interviewed, that if you're starting with gratitude and coming from a place of giving thanks, it's much easier then to get clear on who you are and what you want and live with intent and with purpose. So once I write down 3 things that I'm grateful for, I write down 3 things that would make today a win, and then a daily affirmation. And I don't do that every day, but I do it almost every day. And then I basically get to work here in the office. So before I get to work, I grab a coffee, and I try not to get into the busyness aspects until my brain is properly woken up, which for me is having a coffee. I read through a few emails, but nothing that would make me respond emotionally to it. So they're just generic newsletters around what's going on around the world, or the Daily Stoic, or whatever it might be. And most people, they wake up and they want to pick the low-hanging fruit. They want that feeling of achievement, and the easiest way to have that feeling of achievement is to start responding by emails. But when you're doing that, you're responding to someone else's agenda for your day. And if you actually do your life's work first before you do someone else's, that is one of the best ways to basically succeed in life. So rather than responding to emails, do the 3 actions that are going to get you closer towards your 90-day goals. And once you've done those things, you'll find that you can do a lot of the other things on autopilot. Because the problem with emails, they're like boomerangs. They keep coming back once you send one out. So doing your life's work first, and then I often then just I actually have loud music playing while I do my work, which a lot of people don't have. Like, I will write with music pretty blaring, because it just fires me up.
Can I ask a question on that? What kind of music do you listen to when you do write or work?
Everything. It's generally something fairly aggressive, because I don't want to. I can't take my foot off the pedal. I need to be able, like, often after I have that morning coffee, I'll have a 3-hour work shift of just like where I'm very, very focused and have very, very little downtime. And at the end of it, I'm pretty exhausted. And that might be 2 or 3 hours of very, very creative time, because I feel that most people only really have that in a day. And if you're allocating those 2 or 3 hours to someone else's agenda for your day, or to make someone else successful, then it's just a horrible recipe for your own growth. So I'm very, very protective about those things. And then in the afternoon, I feel like I've already had a productive day, and it means that if I want to then go and do a gym session or whatever that might be, something just to unwind from that, or read a book, whatever it is, my day is already a success. And then between the hours at about 8 and 10 p.m. is actually when I generally respond to just the emails that I can do on autopilot, because I like having that. I like then going to bed with a zero inbox, knowing that today has been a win. That is a perfect day for me. It doesn't happen every day, but that is the goal. And then right before I go to bed, I use the 5-minute journal, which is just writing down 3 amazing things that happened that day, and what I could have done to improve the day. And most of the time, I just write, today was a good day, because if I've had the freedom and the autonomy to be productive and do what I want to do, then can't ask much more than that.
Interesting. I actually went out to a 40th birthday party in Toronto 2 weeks ago, and met one of the co-founders of the 5-minute journal. So he was an interesting guy, and it's not something that I've used personally, but I do my own kind of journaling. But that kind of principle, I think, has, for me at least, been so valuable.
Definitely, because we've all heard the importance of journaling. You hear a lot of major CEOs these days, and entrepreneurs and athletes, they all talk about the importance of journaling, because you can get any worries out of your head onto the paper, or any things that you really want to achieve out of your head, reduce them to writing. If you write your goals down, you're 42% more likely to achieve them. And staring at a blank page is very, very daunting for pretty much everyone. I think it's daunting, and I'm a writer. And having the 5-minute journal just provides that structure. It's like what we were talking about before we recorded. It's like, what can you do to overcome that daunting feeling of staring at a blank page? That should be your goal. It's not to write down a whole thing. It's say, what can I do to start the process to make it easier for me to continue? And it's in the process of continuing more and more things and finishing those things that leads to extraordinary success over time.
What do you find you procrastinate, if anything?
If it's a very, very, very big task, they're the things that I can procrastinate with. An example of those things might be, I had to do a film and online course recently. So that was an hour of usable footage. So that might be hours and hours prepping it. And you find that recording, I had never really filmed any of these online learnings before. And afterwards, it's like being on a podcast or a TV appearance or whatever it might be, where you actually feel quite fatigued at the end of each of these filming things. And of course, you have different takes. Like if a take doesn't work, then you've got to do it again. And so I was pretty exhausted doing these things, but it sat there on my to-do list. And because it was such a big thing, it was a hard one for me to tick off until I allocated basically a whole day to it. And then I woke up on Monday this week and I wrote down in the 5-minute journal that I would have the whole video course done. And I hadn't even started it. I'd written down an outline, but certainly hadn't started filming, and I didn't know how I was going to set it up. And then I wrote that down, and then I promised myself that I'm not going to bed tonight until I've got the entire thing finished, which was a bit of a daunting goal at that point, but I was able to achieve it, and I was very proud of myself as a result. So it's sometimes when you have those very, very big things that are hard to tick off in the one day are things that can be put on the back burner. But apart from that, I'm pretty motivated, pretty self-sufficient overall.
It's interesting because I find a very similar thing where I'll procrastinate something for a long period of time. Often this is something like cleaning the house. And then I'll go and just go on a rampage and get it done, in one day or one afternoon or one evening. For some reason at 9 p.m. I'll decide it's a good time to go clean the whole house. And it's kind of like that straw that breaks the camel's back sort of concept for me, at least.
For sure. And the hardest thing for me, like all those things are in my ideal world, which is, right here in LA where I've got my big external monitor, external keyboard, and it's very, very easy for me to work. And when I'm in Australia or traveling frequently, that's when I'm massively out of the routine, and that's where it makes things very, very difficult, where I then come back and if I haven't done a gym session in a few weeks, or I haven't responded to emails properly in a few weeks, that's where things can get interesting. So I find that when I'm in Australia, or if I just don't have my regular setup, that I just don't gravitate towards doing the work as much. But that's a lesson learned, and I guess just makes me want to be more productive when I am back home too.
Tell us more about your upbringing. Curious to know how you feel your parents shaped who you are today.
They shaped it very much for everything that I have done. So I was actually asked yesterday, where did I earn my first dollar? And that was from packaging CD-ROMs and cassettes for my father. My brother and sister used to pack them with me. Because my father's a fairly accomplished person in finance back in Australia. And so he was the first person ever to create a wealth creator CD-ROM. And so we used to pack these kits, and I guess he liked having some child labour, some cheap child labour in the house. And it was just growing up watching the work ethic and the hustle that he had, that on the flip side was all about helping people. It got the three of us very excited about helping people and really embedded that strong work ethic as well. And then with my mother on the other side, she was a homemaker basically her whole life. And then late in life, she made the decision to go and study at university as a mature age student and graduated with a psychology degree and ended up being a psychologist for victims of child sexual abuse, like a very draining mentally career. And obviously she was in a position to help a lot of people, but certainly very draining. And she has more empathy for anyone that I've ever seen. And they are both of the highest integrity and just really, really nice people. But it's often just because you have that growing up in that situation. So I always felt very much so everything was basically there for me to be a success. But I just had these different things that happened in my life, and we all have our own struggles. And it's actually something that I'm writing in this article that'll be in Success Magazine in a few months' time, which is something that I have never really written about before, and I very, very rarely speak about. It was when I had all these issues with anxiety that started when I was in high school. And when you don't understand it, it's very, very difficult to get yourself out of that situation. So I just kept the feelings to myself because I just didn't know what was going. I just felt like basically a malfunctioned human destined for the scrap heap. And then when you because I would get these feelings of wanting to faint or throw up in exams and then in university, even just attending different classrooms and things as well. It was really weird. And then when you don't care, that was the only way that I could get through all that was if I didn't care. So that was it. It was a temporary Band-Aid solution that I just wouldn't care. And if you don't care about the study and you don't care about attendance, then of course your results are pretty crappy. And I failed a few subjects here and there as well and was progressing with university, but not doing it at a snail's pace. And it was only when at a situation where all these feelings would always come up whenever I was in a situation that my brain decided, or it felt like I could not escape from. And one day I was working at a bottle shop in Brisbane, And I was the very first time that I was rostered on alone. And I knew that the feelings were going to come up potentially worse than ever. And it was in that moment when I was working by myself that I actually fainted and threw up at the same time. And it was then when I had a conversation when I was actually able to talk to my mum of all people, just because she happened to be there, because it was when I came home from that shift. I was only able to be there for about 45 minutes before I had to get the manager to come in and on his day off take over, which is just crazy to think about that. And it was at that time in my life, this big turning point where I thought, well, if I can't study and I can't work, and I come from a great family, and I live in an unbelievably good country like Australia that affords people every opportunity, and I'm looking at all my other friends performing extremely well academically, I can't do the most basic of human tasks. What am I on this earth for? And that's when throughout that journey, it's like that question of what I am on this earth for that, of course, leads to those logical feelings of why am I here? Why not take myself out of this? And it was when I had come home from that shift when I actually spoke to my mum and had this huge vent, and where I told her I can't live like this anymore. I'm done. And she looked at me and she tapped me pointed at my head and my heart and said, you are much stronger than you could ever know. You have everything you need to succeed right here and right here, talking about my brain and my heart. And I'll never forget that moment. That was the biggest, most defining moment in my entire life. And it was at that point where I feel like I said, you know what, here I am. I'm going to engage with life. And as soon as I made that decision, everything changed. And that is what started, which has now been a journey for about 12 years and counting, where I've read basically every book that I can find on self-help and positive psychology and peak performance. It's just then increasingly becoming a person of value from that moment, and living with authenticity, not being afraid to then reveal these vulnerabilities. And another thing that I thought about recently was, if I hadn't have made that decision then to actually talk to her, if I'd have kept it to myself, well, you're not really putting yourself in an opportunity to change and grow from that. And I realized that from sharing my story, that I could maybe help someone else who has a struggle that they have within to actually open up to someone. And from that moment that they can engage with life and start going after everything that they want. And it wasn't like I clicked my fingers and all those feelings were gone. To be able to barely sit for an exam and often find it very uncomfortable to walk into a classroom, to be able to speak on stage in front of 2,000 people regularly without really any issues at all. Like, of course, everyone gets nervous before a big speech. That was just it was just a huge moment.
Mate, thank you for offering that, because, for me, I had kind of hairs stand up in the back of my neck. That was really an amazing story for me, because I've had a very similar journey in many ways. In my early 20s, when I was embarking on my professional career and starting to, kind of explore my talents and all those kind of things, I always knew I was sitting on a lot of potential, but, similarly stricken with anxiety in certain situations, just putting myself out there or worrying about what other people would think of me. I remember when I first started working with my now business partners at Dent, one of the first events we ran, I remember going to the bathroom and throwing up in the bathroom, just physically sick, because I was in this environment with lots of people, and, I felt incredibly nervous and, afraid of being judged and what other people think of me and would I say the right things and all these kind of things. And it was a really challenging time. And the thing that strikes me with your story is that's such an interesting dichotomy that, here you were as a young man really struggling to kind of know yourself, find your place in the world, and, grapple with this anxiety. And yet, as you say, now you speak in front of audiences of thousands of people. And it's admirable, that transition. Obviously, your mum kind of gave you those profound words, right? But was it literally like a lightning bolt of some higher consciousness come into you, and in that moment you shifted and changed? And then if so, what kind of things followed that help you kind of transition from that previous identity that you identified with to the identity that you identify with now?
Well, it was at that point where I looked at everything. I thought, well, where am I and what have I been doing and am I happy with the results? And the answer was basically no across the board. I was eating terribly. I was drinking a lot. I wasn't exercising, not working on myself in any way, shape or form. I was letting things happen. And there is a whole lot to all those different things, but the very first thing I did was look at the physiological symptoms around what was actually going on. So what is actually happening to me right now? It was when I learned things like if you're really focused on the breathing and you become very, very good at breathing, then you can actually greatly reduce the symptoms around what's going on. So breathing is just a great way of calming yourself down. And often now, before I go into a situation where I want to do my best, or if it's a conversation where I want a great result, I actually always take about 60 seconds just to really focus on some deep breathing and think about being present and what energy do I want to bring into the situation, outcome do I want as a result of it. And that step alone made a huge difference. It was then also that I exposed myself to different situations that would bring those things out more and more, because you need to go out there and get busy, as Dale Carnegie says. You can't just sit at home waiting for it to go. And then making sure that I ate well and exercised and tried to get enough sleep. And these are all things that I've gradually gotten better at along the way. So now I make sure I get enough sleep. It can be hard sometimes with a lot going on. Making sure I hang around the right people who encourage all those different things and aren't energy vampires. Making sure I exercise, eating very healthy, all these different things. It's just, I feel like now I have this balance. And it's interesting that you spoke a bit about your journey as well before around something similar, where so many people out there, and I'm sure all of us at one stage or another, we have this fear around what other people might think. When actually, if we reveal our vulnerabilities and learn to package that in a way that we build trust and our story, if people don't identify with that, that's completely fine, because we can't expect everyone in the world to like us. So don't worry so much about those people, which can be simple to say, but often can be difficult to live with. It's a learning process. And over time, you will start to attract people in your life who are like-minded. They think like you, they believe in you, and they just want to help. And sometimes it can be a bit of a moment of almost shedding that skin of who you were to grow into who you are. That can be a difficult transition. But I tell you what, once you actually feel that and you're really motivated and committed to that, then it doesn't matter what people say. If they want to sit there and talk shit, well, they can keep talking, and I hope they're ready to keep talking, because I'm not stopping, and I know you're not going to stop, and this is just part of the process.
I love the metaphor of shedding skin too, because for me that feels like taking this identity that we maybe get hung up on, as to who we are, as opposed, when we identifying with what we do as opposed to who we are and all those kind of things. Do you believe that shedding of skin is a continual process, or are there like sort of, particular points in life where, you shed a layer and then you kind of go through a phase of growth and then shed again and shed again and shed again? What's your view on that?
I think so. Yeah, I think that constant calibration is a really important part of success. And if you can't figure out how you do that yourself, you need to put yourself in an environment, whether it's a mastermind group, some very close friends you have, whatever that might be, is an actual process of what can you do to improve your situation constantly. And I often think about that Ray Kroc quote, it's better to be green and growing than ripe and rotting. I just love that. Like, what can I do to always get better and better and better? And I was so obsessed with that I realized I actually needed to dial that back, because I was always just in a rush. Like, I was walking too quickly, talking too quickly, and spread way too thin. I tried to dial that right back to an optimal balance. And again, something like the 5-minute journal, where it talks about what could you have done to improve the day, or thinking at the end of each week, what conversations did you have or you didn't have? What books did you read or you didn't read? What events did you attend or not attend? And each day we're presented with all those different forks in the road. And over time, your life after 10 years is basically the sum of those decisions that you made or you didn't make to where you are right now. But the best thing about that is the moment that you take 100% accountability for who you are and where you are at all times, you are completely empowered to change the future. And the ones who have that victim mindset want to blame other people for their own situations, you're just not empowering yourself to be able to get yourself out of that situation.
I think, part of the reason, James, why I felt so drawn to you from the first time we met in Australia at an Amplify dinners hosted by a good friend, Ronsley Vaz, was this passage I read in your bio, and I'm just going to read it verbatim, which is, you say, obsessed with what separates ordinary people from extraordinary achievers. James has interviewed more than 100 of the world's revered entrepreneurs, business icons, athletes to unlock their secrets to success. And I'm curious to learn more about where this hunger for extraordinary came from, and how do you define extraordinary for people?
Very good question. Well, first of all, the hunger goes right back to that situation that I was talking about when I had that really defining conversation. And it was when I realized at that point that I could actually take ownership of all areas of my life. And indeed, success is having that alignment around everything, your financial, your physical, your mental, everything. And it was those feelings that are so strong to me, they still are. I will never forget how I felt in that time. It's so strong. And it kills me to think about people in that situation and them not having the ability to grow into the person that they are, and the world never gets to enjoy their potential. And that's what everything that I do is about, helping people to unlock their own potential so that they can share their unique gifts with the world in the best interests of everyone. Because having that, it just fulfills everything. Like the moment people start really living and unlocking their potential, the best way that you can inspire others is to lead by example and to do it yourself. And that's just, I just have this, it's what I do now. It's such a huge part now of my DNA and everything that I do, that I just want to do that, and I will do that forever. And back on being extraordinary now, it's a very clear difference that no one is born with a gold medal around their neck. There are people who are born to different families and things, but just look at the royals. There are plenty of people who are born to great wealth and great fame and couldn't handle it, and their lives are horrible. They don't like it at all. And there are people who come from absolutely nothing and have used that to spur them on to greater success, to massive success. And all these people, all these extraordinary achievers started out ordinary, but they had that unwavering self-belief around, this is who I am, and it doesn't matter what you think, because the most important opinion is how you feel about yourself. And today they enjoy the freedom to be able to structure their day however they want. They have enough financial freedom to be able to contribute to the causes and the people that they care about, and they have an alignment between their financial, physical, and mental health so that they can actually enjoy the success that they have. Because it would be nothing sadder than someone who had focused all their life on financial means and they were a billionaire in a 50-bedroom house but didn't have anyone to even talk to, or they didn't have the health to be able to enjoy that. I think they would be huge regrets for people.
Do you have moments of feeling ordinary today?
People, I don't know, it seems to be other people just define you as being successful as a result of, in inverted commas, achievements about different things. Like, oh wow, a book comes out, it must be a great feeling to have your book in Chicago and New York and London and all around the world. And I just don't think about those things. I just think about what can I do each and every single day. Like I get very frustrated and impatient with myself, and that's still to this day, I have issues with self-talk because I'm just my own worst critic, and I know a lot of people are like that as well. But my wife, she might be doing something in a different room and hear me talking negatively about myself, because I don't know. Does
the swear word come out?
It does, very, very much so. I have some very colourful language when I'm talking to myself, but it also can be a strength because it helps me get a good result for the things that I focus on. So yeah, and there are pros and cons of everything as well, but yeah.
Well, that's what I'm curious to maybe dig into, because in many ways I feel like that's one of the dichotomies that successful people face, or anyone who is ambitious. And, the people listening to this are likely to be an ambitious, driven kind of personality. Is it necessary for us to have that struggle in our lives to go off and achieve the things that we do? Or is it possible to be able to reconcile and find balance between, the negative self-talk and all those things that kind of fuel the drive and the ambition to go and, conquer this person that we need to prove ourselves to, whether it be ourselves or other people in our lives. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. Failure is an essential ingredient. I don't think that you can be a success without exposing and experiencing a great degree of failure and self-discovery. And there are people like Janine Shepherd in the book who was hit by a truck and 10 days in a coma, 6 months in the spinal ward. There are people like Jim Stovall in the book who were diagnosed at the age of 17 said that there were 3 doctors sat him down and said that he was going to go totally and permanently blind. And imagine that at the age of 17, your whole world literally fades to black. And the most fundamental component, probably, of the original Think and Grow Rich and of my new book, and I think of life in general, is that you should never accept temporary failure as permanent defeat. And whether it's a divorce or some type of financial hardship or a relationship breakdown, whatever it might be, but the moment that you let temporary failure become permanent defeat, then it just really stunts your growth in every single way. If you go through life with a chip on your shoulder or blaming other people and not being accountable for your circumstances, you instantly remove your power to be able to change it and get to wherever you want to be.
I love that quote. Never accept temporary failure as permanent defeat. Really, really, I think, wise words. James, you've started lots of different things, right? Businesses in the health and fitness industry, film, activewear, social media, publishing. In that journey, I know we've talked a little bit about the kind of the anxiety and that kind of thing, but even kind of more recently, what were some of the greatest personal challenges you faced in pursuing opportunities in such a diverse range of fields? And kind of the follow-on question to that is, from what you've learned, do you believe mastery is achievable across a large number of areas or disciplines? Or do you feel for most people, we kind of need to choose one or two things to really put our energy and focus into professionally or otherwise?
I think it's good to be excited about a whole heap of different things and different industries, and every single person that you talk to, try and talk about their passions and their experiences and really learn so much about that and get excited in people. And that's an easy thing to be learned. You can read How to Win Friends and Influence People or Never Eat Alone by Keith Ferrazzi. And I'm a huge believer in, if you can succeed in one industry, then you can succeed in any industry. I had never produced a film before, and here I am as a co-executive producer of a $1 million film, and it was, and I had a lot of value to offer, and they really respected my comments. And in fact, having expertise from outside the film industry meant that I was able to offer feedback and ideas that perhaps these people hadn't considered, which I know they really appreciated. And people like Elon Musk, look what he has been able to do with energy companies and Tesla and rockets with SpaceX and PayPal before that, a whole heap of different things. So I'm a firm believer in all those things on the condition that you have not spread yourself so thin that you are not able to progress and help those things get to where they need to be. And the biggest challenge for me on that whole journey would have been maintaining relationships around me. So relationships with my now wife. There was a conversation where she said to me, she asked if I could have just one day a week where I wouldn't be looking at my computer and working. And I told her that's like 15% of my time. I can't do that. I always need to be doing these things because I had very, very big goals, and I still have these massive goals. And the only reason that we have succeeded as a couple is because the biggest thing that she gives me is freedom to be who I am and do what I want, because she knows that if she didn't do that, then I wouldn't be happy. I wouldn't be being who I am. And then that would be huge issues over time. So that's a big thing. And then the relationship as well with my family, where I do want to be present and there for them. But if I've got so many things on the go, puts you it's easy to be frustrated and impatient, because often we can be meanest to the people who we love the most and spend the most time with. So making a conscious decision to unravel a lot of those different, or just get myself out of those environments. So I'm in a position right now where I'm still very, very busy, but I am much more able to, when I go back to Australia, I'm going back to see my family and spend time with them, to be present without my phone, without a computer, because I have made that such a huge focus now around offering that balance. So right now I could easily have a day off without any worries at all, which is something that I couldn't have done a couple of years ago.
I think for me, this has been a challenge as well, which is blending professional ambitions with, family and personal ambitions as well. It's like, finding the balance between going off and building the empire as well as, building the family at the same time. Going back to that conversation you had with Jen at the time, how did you guys navigate through that? You said, hang on, this is 15% of my time, I can't do it. What then ensued, and what were some of the, principles or practices or kind of rules you put in place, and how did you personally reconcile that in your own mind to go, actually, you know what? The 15% I'm giving up of the empire, building the empire, this is an equally important part. Or how did that blend in your mind?
Well, there were times there where we would go and see her parents who lived like an hour and a half away, and she'd be driving and I'd have my laptop open with my personal hotspot on the phone, working in the passenger seat from a laptop. Many times we did that, and there were times when I would be in Australia for 3 months at a time, 4 months at a time, which is a long time when you're in a new relationship trying to figure everything out. And something that I do every single day and still do whenever we're not together is I always email her at night before I go to bed. I've always done that and always do that, and she does that now as well, which is good, because I figure in a relationship, as long as they know, even if you don't have the opportunity to talk that day, or even if you don't have the opportunity to talk for a few days at a time, and we do talk almost every day in one way, shape or form when we're apart, but I always email her before I go to bed, because she knows that my last thought before I go to sleep is always of her, and I'll write her a 300-400 word email about my day, include photos around what happened, and that way she wakes up and then she's got that in there as well, and she can revisit that at times if we don't have an opportunity to chat on the phone. And that is just something that we have done, and it's really worked well for us, and it really has just kept us really connected. And actually, in many ways, like always finding the gift in every situation, just being apart, I think, was great, because you do then miss each other a lot, and you do want to make the most of it when you have that time together.
Do you believe that separation is necessary in a healthy relationship for an entrepreneur, a business owner who's busy, traveling a lot, that kind of thing? Do you see it as more of a gift or more of a curse?
I think it's a bit of both, and it completely depends on the circumstances, but I would much rather be out of the environment for a week than in the environment where we're having big arguments because I got stuff to do and I'm stressed out, she's got stuff to do and she's stressed out, and then you really just butt heads and then grow to resent each other because you haven't given each other that freedom. And we also sit down every year and we plan out our goals for the year. So we don't do it together. We sit down and we plan out our finances and things together, just so we have that transparency, because communication and finance are the two reasons for relationship breakdown. But we'll go through the success plan template that I've got, and we write down our mission and our values, and then we write down our 90-day, our 1 year, 3 year, 5 year, and perfect destination goals for all areas of our life. And then we talk about it. And that just provides that. I want to know who she is and where she wants to go, so we can give them the freedom to pursue that, but also be able to help them when we know what they need help with.
Interesting. And I love that. And I think that's an amazing practice. And I've spoken to quite a few successful couples that I admire and who do similar things. Sounds like you have quite a structured approach to it. I know some people have, more unstructured approaches, more structured approaches. What happens when you come together and perhaps you have goals that are diverging? Obviously, you have lots of things that converge, and that's what makes you compatible and a great couple. But, when things are diverging, what's your thinking around that? How do you approach that to, make sure that, that doesn't cause a rift in the relationship, let's say?
It's funny, I'm just thinking back to some funny conversations that we've had. She just likes to be kept in the loop around what's going on, because I think she would just like the opportunity just to say her thoughts on a particular subject and then let me do what needs to be done. So the most awkward, for want of a better word, conversations that we have around that would be things like if I wanted to invest money or use money or start a business or whatever it is, she just wants to be kept in the loop because I get very excited about the prospect of doing different things and always have these ideas. I can't switch it off. It's annoying. I would much rather be able to have more tunnel vision for fewer number of ideas and go really deep on those things. So she just likes to be kept in the loop. So that's just something that I have learned, and it's all a learning experience. And we've had certainly some robust discussions to get to that point. So I think just understanding what's important to the other person and having the opportunity to actually talk about it, then you just feel better about giving them the freedom. But I very much follow that entrepreneurial path, and I have always done that since she's known me and will always be on that path. She understands that part of me, and she has a very stable corporate job. That's what she loves. So that actually works quite well too.
Thank you for sharing, such a personal topic. I think one of the things I took from it was that, as you said, communication is one of the, key areas of breakdown for a lot of couples. And I think, it sounds like strong communication is the thing that resolves any kinks in the road, so to speak. Kind of shift gears to slightly and kind of ask you around some of your own dichotomies that you faced in your life. I know we've kind of skirted around the edges of a few, but in your book, Think and Grow Rich, The Legacy, there's a passage that I wanted to read which struck me and stood out, which is, you say, one of the most fundamental points in the achievement philosophy is that poverty consciousness will actively seize any mind that is not occupied with wealth consciousness. Those who do not truly understand this point and its enormous implications will eventually give way to the negative influences around them, who have made a habit of controlling their thoughts and directing them to whatever end they desire, will live a life of unprecedented prosperity. Now, a lot of success principles talk about direction of thought and consciousness. However, I'm curious, and particularly the topic of this podcast is, when you feel the direction of your thought and consciousness is pulling you in opposite directions, what are some examples where you've experienced those dichotomies in your life, or is there one particular dichotomy that's really stood out to you in your journey to date? And what did you do to navigate it?
I'm really impressed that you picked that passage out. That's actually my favorite. And I was laughing before because I actually could have finished that whole sentence for you as well. And at each speech I do, I actually put up a slide and say, this is the most important. I say, if you take nothing away from this presentation, I want you to remember this, that each day, if you do not make the decision to win, you have automatically made the decision to lose, because the poverty consciousness automatically overtakes any mind that is not preoccupied with being success conscious. And it's so true, and it's getting worse and worse in this modern world of procrastination, where it's so easy for us to be distracted, yet feel like we're still participating in life. Every pick up your phones and everything that we do these days has a like, a comment, or a share button. So we feel like we're busy and we're actually participating, but we're not really doing anything as far as living with purpose or intent that's getting us to where we need to be. And that biggest turning point that I mentioned earlier in my life is that if we really talk about the dichotomy of this, is that, so we know then from what we just said that everyone will automatically get pulled to the darkness unless we make the decision each and every single day to make the habit of stepping and living in the light. And sometimes things in life just happen to you. So I had a situation when I was living in Boston about 5 years ago. It was on Thanksgiving in Vermont, playing my first foray into American football, and I had a third-degree shoulder separation. And that was a bit of a painful experience. And it's like, well, before you know it then, you can't then go into a gym session. So then if someone offers you a beer, you say, oh, cool, well, I can do it because I'm not going to the gym. And then as a result, you start eating poorly, and before you know it, you're massively back in that darkness. And you might wake up and 6 months has passed. You might wake up and 6 years have passed. But if you make that decision that no matter what happens, this is what I'm going to do, like I'm going to get up and do my mobility work or whatever it is in your life, or I'm always going to eat healthy. And that is a constant struggle. then that's just something that you need to focus on. So that's actually where all my branding came from. Win the day. That each day, if you do not make the decision to win, you have automatically made the decision to lose.
In that time when you were faced with that kind of shoulder separation, you kind of fell back into some bad habits. Was that a period where you were really torn and afflicted around what you needed to do next? And then what gave you the kick up the arse to be able to get back on to the right path or figure out what the right path was?
So that period after that, so I had those issues then, and then started drinking again more, and then eating bad. And then I had a relationship breakdown with the person who I actually moved to Boston with. We were going to move to New York together. And then, so there I was living alone. I'd been prescribed these oxycodone, I think it was called, these pills that just didn't agree with me. They just made me depressed and miserable. And then I just finished, I was about to finish this MBA thing, and I was like, God, what am I going to do now? Like, we were going to move to New York. I was going to get a job at this program. You go in with a plan, and it's like in a washing machine where it spits you out in a completely different direction. And between the injury and the horrible routine that I had then built for myself and the relationship breakdown, and then that uncertainty of my future, and then when I heard that I was nominated class speaker to actually speak in front of 2,000 people and live streamed on the internet 2 weeks later, and I was a mess. I was like, oh my God, how am I going to do this? And it was the worst moment of my life since that story I had told, which was about 10 years before that time, about 6 or 7 years before that time. And it was a very, very difficult thing for me to overcome. And I feel like the biggest turning point since then was when in the entrepreneurial journey, if you really care about success in your business and your clients, the people that and your staff, and you really are obsessed with creating value and you're competitive, it is a huge roller coaster. And I think you're always going to have that roller coaster of emotions, and you need to learn to dance in the rain when it falls. But it was only once I had the opportunity to be the co-executive producer of the Think and Grow Rich film and author of a modern companion to Think and Grow Rich, at that time when it was very clear to me that it was almost like the clouds parted, and I was like, all right, here is my mission, to help people take ownership of their financial, physical, and mental health. And now I am free, and I just don't think I will ever have those feelings again. It's possible, and I guess as long as you've got great friends and family around you to get through it, which I'm grateful enough to say that I have, and I work very, very hard on maintaining those relationships and always checking in with people too. But I'm not expecting to get back to that dark place.
Was it the film that gave you that moment where you had that clarity of mission of helping people find physical, emotional, financial health? Was that the critical moment where things shifted?
It was through the process of interviewing all these people and figuring out their journey of finding out who they were and their purpose. And there's a Steve Jobs quote that says you can only connect the dots looking back, never forward. And I think about that almost every day. And I realized then that the 10 years that I actually spent in financial planning, and then having a CrossFit gym and a weightlifting club and an activewear business, but along the way I was just obsessed with helping people with their and my own mental health as well, and really exploring all of that stuff. I realized that was it. Everything that I had done was leading to this point. And I have always felt like I wanted to start my own business and be a success and do these different things. But it was like the universe was saying, no, you need to go through more adversity first, or you need to go through more experiences first. And there's a guy called Dr. Dennis Kimbro, who's actually in my new book as well. He wrote a book called Think and Grow Rich, A Black Choice. And he said there are no bargains at the counter of success. You must pay the price in advance and in full. And I finally felt through the process of writing the book and producing the film that I had paid the price in advance and in full. And now I was ready to serve everyone else.
I love that. I love that so much. How do you avoid a runaway train effect when it comes to success psychology and not really stopping and maybe just enjoying some of the simple things in life too?
What do you mean exactly?
So, for example, do you ever feel like, because of the ambition, because of the drive, you've got such a focus to go out and achieve the things that you want to achieve? How do you find balance in just stopping smelling the roses and, enjoying some of the simpler things in life?
It can be hard to do, actually. Recently with my wife Jen's family, we have fantasy football, this league for the NFL, which has been great. So I've actually been enjoying keeping in the loop on that. But I just love what I'm doing. But one of the biggest ways one of the things that I most enjoy where I can really switch off, because I have actually started to grow up and resent my phone a lot, because we're just glued to these things, and you just can't stop. If I've got it around me, unless I'm with someone or having a meal, I won't use it. But what I like to do is go stand-up paddleboard surfing. I've been doing that a fair bit lately, and I bought the board about 3 months ago, and I've been going out. I haven't in the last month because I've been traveling and it's been wet here, and you don't go in the ocean in LA when it's been raining because of all the runoff. And but I love being out there where it is still such a high intensity push, because I feel like in everything that I do, I want to go as hard and as fast as possible. But there are no mobile phones out in the ocean, and being out there, enjoying the sunshine, the salt water, dolphins and sea lions, and I feel like the ocean is the great leveler as well. Anytime you think you're too big for your boots, a huge wave will come and knock you on your ass, and you'll be humbled very quickly.
What fascinates you most about the world today, and what do you think most people in the world are also underestimating today?
I think the world of automation that we're in right now is pretty amazing. So in the future, when we've got things like self-driving cars, and I'm even just still amazed that when right now we can pick up a phone, which is also an amazing camera, and you can order a car that will come and pick you up for a couple of bucks and drop you wherever you need to be. And you can even have whatever playlist you want playing when they pick you up as well. And even just the invention of something like Spotify, and how nowadays you can make high definition video calls for free to anyone in the world. Like this is crazy. But I also think people need to be more engaged at the very clear realization that if you don't look after your own future, that this process of automation might wipe you out next, because futurists and things like that, and people who love tech are trying to figure out what the next thing is coming. But there are a lot of things that we have no idea what's going to be out there. And if all of a sudden your job's gone and you've got no skills, and you haven't worked on increasingly becoming a person of value, or you haven't worked on your relationships, and you've lived in the darkness, then what are you going to do when all of a sudden you've just got nothing in your life? So I think that the earlier that you can get excited about your own future and work on your skills to essentially future-proof your own life, and maybe even put yourself in a situation where you can leverage some of these technologies and your own relationships to add value to the market and people that you know, and bring a product or a service to market, because it's never been easier to do that. And I'm also quite amazed that people are happier to sit there and just spend 5 hours a day watching TV, when right now you've got access to all the same information that people who lived 100 years ago had, with libraries and universities and education. And the only difference being today that if you couldn't be bothered walking down the road to grab a book, that you can pay someone to actually drop it at your door. And if you couldn't be bothered reading, you can actually pay someone to read it for you in the form of an audio book, and thousands of podcasts out there for free. And I don't know, I'm just amazed that people aren't as engaged with wanting to improve their mind.
Right, in terms of what you want to transform for people in the world as well. James, I really appreciate you coming on the podcast, mate. Like I said, since the moment I met you, I felt like there was a kindred spirit there, in terms of someone who, is also called forth for other people to lead extraordinary lives. I feel like part of my journey over the last few months has been connecting to, really ultimately, that's very much my mission as well. My history, my story, my background, everything I want to do in the future is about doing things that help people transform into leading extraordinary lives, beyond the ordinary, whatever that may mean. It might be a homemaker, right? Or a business owner, or whatever it is. There's no kind of judgment around any of it, but simply kind of choosing to step up and reach the full potential of what you can do as a human being, I think is a very noble thing to do. And so maybe as a parting lesson for people listening, if you could cast your mind back over your journey, everything that we've talked about, what would you say was the single worst decision you ever made in your life? And simultaneously, on the flip side to that, what was the single best decision?
Oh, it's a very tough on-the-spot question. The single worst decision is hard because I feel that we are always learning, and I don't know if I've just got a bad memory, but I actually don't think about things in the past. I don't know what it is. I just look forward in everything, which can also be bad sometimes as well. But as far as a single worst decision, I wish I was more engaged with when I was younger. With things like academic performance, I think I could have saved myself maybe a few years and a bit of hardship along the way. To the extent that education is important around difference with things like A's and stuff, like we know that education is meaningless unless you find a practical way to add value in the marketplace. I actually did a speech in Australia a few months ago, and they had some prospective OP1 candidates and duxers of schools in the audience, and I don't know, there were a couple of them in there that almost had a bit of a too cool for school attitude, and I really wanted them to understand that it does not, no one cares about how many degrees you've got or how many awards you've got or what OP you got. People care about what value you can create in the marketplace and what value you can create for your staff and what product that you can bring and all those different things. But I wish I was more engaged when I was younger academically.
And then single best decision that you've ever made?
Oh, single best decision I ever made. I'd probably be in trouble if I didn't pick my wife on that. But as far as single best decision, I think has probably just kept in touch, like really made a proactive decision to keep in regular contact with the people who are most important in my life. There are people I talk to every week or every couple of weeks. There are also people who you might only see a few years later or a couple of years later, and you catch up and it's like nothing has changed, which is great as well. But, just having a handful of people in your life who you really talk to regularly and you invest in those personal relationships that are rock solid, that would probably be the best decision.
James Whittaker, thank you so much for coming on the Dichotomy podcast.
Thank you very much. You're living and breathing all the stuff that you're talking about, so I'm just honoured to be here.
Hey, thanks so much. All the best. Hey, so thanks for listening. I hope you enjoyed that conversation as much as I did. As you know, I just love talking life, business, philosophy with like-minded souls who think deeply about the world, their business, and how to live a good life. I'll be releasing episodes on this podcast as regularly as possible, at least twice a week for the foreseeable future, so stay tuned for the next episode. And if you want to join a community of ambitious and driven entrepreneurs, mavericks, change makers, those kind of people, then head to my website, www.mikejamesreid.com, and that's Reid spelled R-E-I-D. You'll find a whole bunch of resources to be able to connect with me and a community of entrepreneurs that are up to something in the world. Until next time, thanks so much for listening. Oh, and one final request. If you've enjoyed this show, please give it an honest rating and review on iTunes or any other way that you listen to the podcast. I'd really appreciate it. It just helps the show get found and out to more people's ears who will hopefully love it as much as you do. Thanks so much again, and much love from me.